My name is Regina Batista. One of our meetups every month is going to be what we're calling the Miami Jira user group. And maybe some of you saw the posting on Atlassian. So we're officially Jira user group in the South Florida, Miami area. So we're very excited. So that means once a month, one of our speaking engagements is going to be all things related to Jira, perhaps, or any other tools that any of our special speakers want to share that promote our agility. Okay, so today I'm an Agile coach. I'm an enterprise Agile coach. I help with Agile transformations at the leadership, at the program, at the team level. My favorite part of Agile is the Agile mindset, right? I come from a project management background, so that's also been very helpful because I understand all the impediments that I had when I was a project manager, doing different types of implementations and following the waterfall methodology. And then when I became an Agile coach, I was like, oh my goodness, now I have all these great tools, right? And all these techniques that I can use to make things better. How do we make things better? How to make our Agile teams better, how to make our customers better, how to make our leaders better, and how to make the organizations better. So I'm very excited. I love what I do for a living, and I'm a trainer as well. So I'm going to share some fun, unique things. What I threw in here today was just like a mix of different topics, right? I said, okay, if we're going to learn about Jira, some of you may already have experience. So if you guys can put on the chat, how many of you have used Jira in the past or are currently using Jira? And then also put your title, like what's your role? Are you a coach? Are you a Scrum Master? Are you a project manager? Are you an Agile project manager? Are you a program manager? Are you a technical lead, a technical manager? Are you a product owner? Are you a business owner? Because we also have a lot of business agility. So if you guys can put that on the chat, it's always good for me when I start the conversation to find out what people's backgrounds are. Let's see. Oh, Deval, you're an Agile coach and a Jira expert for my POs. Awesome. So Deval, I may throw some questions your way too. Okay, be ready. I know Steven's an Agile coach. He's also one of our speakers. We got Ashley's a project manager with Confluent experience. Wonderful. Oh, but she might be using Jira for the first time. If you're good with Confluence, you're good with Jira. Jason's a Scrum Master, has used Jira. Let me see. Anu has used Jira and a head of a community development. Awesome. Kim has been a senior Scrum Master, Jira project admin, and Jira admin. Very, very good. And let's see. Thomas used it for almost 10 years, essentially a Scrum Master. See, but was slotted in the role activities for a small team. Great. And then we've got Howard is an enterprise Agile coach, heavy Jira usage. Very great. And Jira Align. Very good. And then Liz is learning and development consultant, DASM certified. Used Jira for a long time for the tech contract. Very good. And then Vicky Chung, she's a PM and product owner, used Jira for 1 year. Okay, very, very good. So the focus today is going to be Jira for teams. Oh my goodness, and we have a Jira architect. I think you guys are going to teach today's class because you guys know more about Jira than actually I do. So I am not a Jira admin, let me say that. I launch Agile teams all the time, and my goal is to make sure that when we launch Agile teams, and I'm teaching them how to be Scrum teams, that we ensure that they are trained in Jira or whatever tool that they're using to be able to set up their team boards and be able to use the board and the tool to collaborate and prioritize and estimate stories, right? So that way they start sprinting. But let's look at the agenda. So we're going to look at some samples of Scrum boards, but I want this to be very interactive, okay? I have samples of some of the team boards that some of the organizations that I've worked with in the past have used, but there may be different approaches to this, and maybe you guys can share. You can put it on the chat, or you can say, hey, look, for my teams, this is the way that we have it set up. I want to talk a little bit about when we set up a Scrum board for the teams, what are the different Agile practices that can help us maybe come up with some great boards, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about how may the definition of done exercise for your team help in setting up better Scrum boards for our teams. Then there's the backlog grooming, right? The actual best practices for backlog grooming, and how do we set up the backlogs in Jira, and how perhaps the techniques of definition of ready might help us do that in a better way. Then I have some samples. Again, this is pretty basic because we're at the team level. Most of you are already familiar with the velocity charts, the burn down charts, and the sprint reports, but some folks here are new. So maybe when we review that, we can share some of the best practices and why the teams utilize these reports and how it helps the Scrum Masters and the Agile teams sort of define the work that they're doing a little bit more. And then what I did was I brought in some samples of what I'm going to call scaling Jira, okay? Because a lot of us, I'm an SPC as well. The organizations that I have been with do use scaling Agile best practices. And so we utilize Jira at what we call the program level, or we use Jira to visualize Agile release trains and pull data. We're going to look maybe at the functionality that's called Plan View. So you guys can take a look at some of the examples of how we may set that up for some of our teams. And then also some dashboards. There's a lot more to Jira, but with the time permitted that we have today, this is what we have, okay? So any questions so far? Okay. All right. So if you look below that, let's look at the Scrum framework. So it's all about the Scrum framework, right? Scrum teams are high performing teams, right? At least that's the goal, to get our Scrum teams to be high performing. And I teach, Scrum Master certification class. If any of you are interested, please let me know, reach out to us. We're actually including an AI component to that. So it's like Scrum Master certification AI powered, right? Because that's the future. But Scrum is still Scrum. The Agile teams are still going to have to go through the same ceremonies, have the same inputs and outputs, and learn to be high performing. As you all know, we've got the product owners, we've got the team, we've got the Scrum Masters, the three major roles. A lot of you have been serving in these roles as well. And then we've got all the different meetings. So the conversation that I want to have today is, okay, how can we best utilize Jira as a tool within the Scrum framework? I've also done Jira for Kanban teams as well. And we've done other customized boards for other business teams as well. And it may be a combination of like a Kanban board and a Scrum board. I'm not going to get too much into that today because I want to focus on the Scrum teams. But think about the Scrum framework. That's why I brought this picture when we're having these conversations, right? The different meetings. How maybe we use the tool for sprint planning. What are some of the best practices? Maybe we use the tool for the daily stand-ups, for product backlog refinement, for the retros, and also for the sprint demos, right? So just keep that in mind. I know many of you are coaches, you're experts, so I know you'll have a lot to share. So this is a sample, guys. This is a snapshot. So this is a sample of a board. And I want to zoom in a little bit on that first one, because I want to focus on the setup of the board and the columns, right? So, we always start out with a to-do and we always end with a done. And anything in between is in progress, for those of you that have set this up. As you guys know, we have the to-do. Here's a sample of in development, in progress, right? Many organizations separate the ready for QA from the actual in QA. I have some teams that have done this in the past. And then look at the interesting part. They have something called blocked. They have the column called blocked right before we go into UAT. Does anybody know why would you have a column called blocked right before you go into user acceptance testing? What could be many of the reasons why you would have a blocked column in your Scrum board? Who could name some examples?
Maybe the development team has not given some kind of a test plan to test how best to test it.
Okay, so there might be some testing impediments. Very good. What else, guys?
Which issues have impediments that are preventing progress?
Okay, other issues that might come up. I love it. I see in the chat there might be a dependency. April said that. Rachel, hi Rachel, welcome. Or the QA failed, right? And we may be stuck with bugs. Very, very good. What other reasons could we be blocked at any point in time here in the board?
Because they put in a spike because they need to do more research.
Perhaps, yeah. They may to do more research. That's good. Anybody else?
So there's a couple things. You can have a blocked column if you're waiting for like another team to coordinate a dependency and you're waiting for them to finish that. So that could be a reason. Another could be an impediment, or maybe there's something in the requirement. But there's actually a status that you can have in Jira that actually lists it as blocked, and it will flag it a red color. So you don't necessarily need to put it into blocked, but depending on the team and how they decide to set it up, either or work, for the team.
I love it, because now she gave us another Jira configuration option for block. Thank you, Kim.
A third option as well, at least where I am, where you can right click on a story and flag it, or flag it with comments, and it will show up yellow on the Kanban board.
Okay, very good. See, you guys are awesome. I'm actually writing these things down because we're here to learn and to share with each other, right? So thank you. I really appreciate it. So you're all right. The important part is that we want to show and be transparent in the board where there's any type of blockers to getting to done. One of the other many huge blockers that we face is sometimes when we have, other than the product owner, other stakeholders doing user acceptance testing, that they may not be available. That's a big blocker as well. That's why this particular team, this is just one sample of many, this particular team decided to put it right before UAT, but we know that the QAs are using it, and we know that the developers are also using the column for anything that is a blocker as well. Now, related to the flow, let's zoom out. Now, one of the practices that I like to do when I launch an Agile team to truly define what the Scrum board should look like is we go through the exercise of definition of done. That's why I put this here on the right-hand side. It's one of my preferences to do this type of exercise before confirming what their Scrum board should look like. Because that way, when they define what the definition of done is for them, after they go through that exercise, then they might have a better understanding of what their flow should be for their user stories. And then we can better define what their Scrum board looks like. Any thoughts about that? Have any of you ever done that before coming up with the Scrum board design. And I can tell you many organizations have a standard templates in Jira, and all their teams have similar type of Scrum boards. You'll see that, okay? Because I've also seen that. And everybody follows all the Scrum teams follow the same flow. But where you are allowed to have each team come up with the best flow for them, sometimes doing this definition of done exercise with the teams is very helpful. Any thoughts about that? Have you guys ever done that? And do you see the association between DoD and the Scrum board? How do you guys feel about that?
I mean, only after the definition of done is met, then you can close the thing. So you can transition it to done. I'm stating the obvious, but the way it was implemented is basically you have several checkboxes. You need to make sure that they're all checked.
Correct. And so that's very good. Anybody else?
It just depends on where you are in your organization. So you can have, brand new teams who have never established definition of done, which may need a little bit more guardrails to help them rev up. If they're new to Jira, a new team. But then also as you progress, you want to make sure that it's not too restrictive for dev teams that have experience. So it's not time consuming where they're just having to check these boxes. So having boundaries, but flexibility depending on where your team is at has been my experience. But a lot of the teams fail to do this aspect is what I've experienced a lot of. Causes the problems basically, because everybody's like, oh, you didn't do this part, you didn't do that. But it's hard sometimes to get developers into the responsibility, right? Or the flow of making sure that each part is done, because they're obviously very busy. So you don't want it to be too hindering, but you want to make sure that you have the quality behind everything.
Awesome. These are like checklists, right? Because many times you have new developers that come in and are onboarded, and they may not have worked in a Scrum team before, or you have new QAs or different skills within the team. It's good to have this checklist. It's good for the Scrum Master. Why? Because if anything goes wrong, think of the definition of done as a checklist, but it's also a working agreement on the team of what they're going to agree to go through for the story to be done. And there's many different parts to that. And here are some examples that we're showing here. Like the code is checked in, unit tested is completed, acceptance criteria is completed, QA is completed, and then the acceptance criteria at the end has been reviewed by the product owners. UAT has been completed. It's a good practice. It's a good practice because if there's any blockers, remember we were talking about blockers, is perhaps that maybe some of these steps were missed. The way that and I'm just sharing some of what I personally do, it's not right or wrong. It's just, all of us have our different approaches. When I do the definition of done exercise, let's say the organization has a default Scrum board that everybody's using. And hey, we have to use this because this is the way that Jira has been set up for the Agile teams and they have to follow that. So I may come in and I may do a definition of done and say, okay, what does it mean for each column to be done? And so you've got the horizontal definition of done, which is each of the steps that are very much related to the different skills that you have in the team. But then I have each of the team members do their definition of done vertically. So what does it mean for development to be completed? And then they go boom, 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 and they do a checklist. What does it mean to be ready for QA? Oh, they do this, and they do a checklist. And then what does it mean to be QA completed? And what does it mean for UAT to be completed? All the way to production release. That's what I love to do because that helps me ensure that nothing is missed. And then when you run it as an exercise, they're all working on this board and they're all adding their parts and pieces. And then you summarize it at a high level. You don't want to make it too tedious and too long of a checklist, but it's generic enough that it applies to every user story and that the team can use that for their definition of done at the Agile level.
One thing that they can also do is when you have them create their user stories, they're supposed to add, depending on how it's configured on each board, but either the task or subtask on the child level of the user story. So you can actually have the Jira admin configure it. That way, all tasks have to be marked done before you can actually close out the user story. Having a mix of having automation to assist the team to be more efficient, but also, like I said, have that guardrail without having them have to think about it manually because they're whipping around. I want to close out the user story, finish it. But that's another way to help that definition of done is a user story is not complete until all tasks subtasks are completed.
So I wrote the word automation. Yes, we can configure Jira to do some things automatically. So anybody else using any automation in their Scrum board?
So for our DOR and DOD, we actually have a screen that shows up between a status of it moving into in progress from to do to in progress. We have a little screen that pops up that shows that checklist for definition of ready. We also have a similar screen for when we move things to done that shows our definition of done checklist as well, just as a final verification of, hey, instead of having to click buttons and go to Confluence, which of course that information is in Confluence, having an extra screen pop up in between those status changes just helps keep that fresh in your mind. If you're a product owner and you're moving something to done, oh, I checked all the functional boxes, I checked all the performance boxes, the security boxes. make sure everything was working how I expected. So I thought that was a really good piece of functionality to have to keep at our fingertips.
I love it. That's awesome. It just pops up. That's really good. That's really,
Yeah.
really, you don't have to go anywhere and open up anything, a Confluence or a
Nope.
sheet or anywhere else to go look for it. I love it. I had not heard about that one. So I'm gonna be taking a look to see how we could do that on my side. I love
I'll
it.
show you how. Yeah, I'll help
Okay,
you.
thank you. So
You can do an automation rule as well. If you have, so you have 10 user stories that are all rolled up to an epic, where if all of those 10 user stories are completed, it will auto close that epic, just depending on really the product owner preference. You know, some of them want to make sure they check and balance, and others are like, hey, if all the user stories are done and signed off on, we're good. But there's a ton of customization for optimization that you can do.
we do
Automation,
have
sorry.
one. We do have one at the Epic level that as soon as the first story was created and as soon as the first story went into in progress, the Epic status changed to in progress. That's one that we did that I remember, that I recall now.
So saying similar to Jira, I'm using ClickUp. ClickUp is also used for project management or product management. And I'm running a community for programmers, and basically we're given simulation projects for devs to follow through. And we actually set up automation in terms of not only as they move along onto progress, but also as they got a blocker, immediately notify people who are in charge of the sprint or leads on the sprint. Since they alternate. That's one. And two, that's for blockers, but also when it's done. So as soon as they have 2 or 3 checks on depending on the definition of done, because each team has a different definition. Once they fit those 3 or 2, they automatically also notify the PM, in this case me, to actually move it into the closed column. So it's actually pretty handy to have those configured, at least in terms of a sprint management.
All right. Thank you so much, Javier. Welcome. And thank you for sharing. We appreciate it. And what I wanted to focus on was the relationship between definition of done and the Scrum board setup and the design of it and the different types of columns, right? And the importance of the definition of done at the team level. Now we know we can automate the checklist. It'll show up on your Scrum board, which I love, and all the different automations to ensure that we get to done and perhaps notifications. The bottom picture is just a snapshot of what a backlog looks like. And so you guys could see this is the backlog of the same team. These are all their user stories. And then to the left, we have all the different epics. Using epics is a great functionality to do in Agile. We have the higher level features, and then the user stories are the children of the parent feature, which is what we call an epic in Jira. I know in some other applications, it's not called an epic, perhaps it's called a feature, but in Jira, pretty much the configuration is you've got your initiative, that could be your project, and that has the children that are the different epics, which are your features or your higher level functionality. And the epics have the children of the user stories. The user stories is what we bring into the sprint, and this is what we get to the definition of done. But when we're looking at the backlog, guys, what is it about? It's about the definition of ready, right? It's about the definition of ready. What does it mean for that story to be ready? And I have been using the language a lot lately of like, hey, if it's not ready, what does that mean? That means it's not ready for development. Because by the time that we're getting that story into the sprint, it has to be ready for development. So on the right-hand side, I brought in a little bit of the definition of ready. And just like we have a definition of done, we have a definition of ready. This is another great practice for all of our Scrum Masters and our project managers, and especially our product owners. Having this checklist is, and again, very similar, it's a checklist, but it is an exercise that we want the teams to do together. The most important thing to have self-organizing, high-performing teams is that you give the teams the opportunity to do these exercises themselves. That's really the only way that they're going to learn and that they're going to own it. When they come up with the checklist themselves, that means they're being judicious, they're understanding the concept, and then they're going to own it and they're going to execute it and they're going to be accountable for it. Think about that. Coaching perspective, from a Scrum Mastering perspective, from a project management perspective. So the same thing that we say, hey, definition of ready is what gets a story to be, when we say definition of done is what gets a story to be done, the definition of ready is what makes the story ready for the sprint, aka ready for development. There's a lot of different things. It's just some of the many examples, but these are some of the basic things. Is the story clearly defined? Clearly state the business value? Does it follow the investment model, right? Is it negotiable? Is it estimable? Is it small enough? Is it testable? Does it follow the user story writing format? And I know that not all Agile teams follow the user story writing format. In Scrum, we do teach this format as a recommendation. As a role, I want to achieve something so that then I can produce a value or a benefit. The great thing that I love about this format for me is that as a role is that you're focusing on the customer. Remember, user stories, you want to identify who your customer is, who's your target audience. The I want to is the functionality, is what are we going to build? What are we going to create? What are we going to enhance? What are we going to modify? And so that I can is the benefit, is the solution. As a developer, I want to know what the benefit is of what I'm creating or building or enhancing. And I want to know who it's for. Those are some of the best techniques, out there and good recommendations. We also want to make sure that the user stories are prioritized, that they're free from external dependencies, and that they're estimated. Guys, who estimates the stories?
The team.
The team estimates the story, not the scrum master. And I'm going to say, not the technical lead. Okay. I got to say that, even though our technical leads are great, man, and they provide great solutioning and they support the team and they guide those developers. But technical leads, for those of you that are out there, please, please, please make sure that that knowledge transfer is happening to your Agile teams and that the estimations are coming from them. Okay. And if you do that, then again, then they'll own it and they'll be held accountable for it because they're the ones that are coming up with it. So the acceptance criteria is one of the key factors of a user story. So tell me a little bit about the experience that you guys have had with acceptance criteria. I love it. It's a great practice, right? It's more of like the details of what's going to make that story ready from the detailed requirements perspective. Are any of you experiencing Agile teams that are not writing acceptance criteria or that are having a hard time with that? Let's share some of our pain points.
Yeah, all the time. No acceptance criteria, bad acceptance criteria, short acceptance criteria, acceptance criteria for requirements that are not in the story. I mean, all different mixtures and mixes of acceptance criteria, but we do our best.
I know. And so here's the thing, right? It depends who's writing the user stories many times, right? If you have a good product owner, sometimes they're awesome at writing it. They come in with their draft acceptance criteria. If the product owner has a business analyst, the business analyst helps them because they're there with them gathering the requirements. But I always tell the QAs in the team that they always make the acceptance criteria better. Why? Because the acceptance criteria is what leads to a lot of your test scripts and a lot of your testing scenarios, right? So you have good acceptance criteria, guys. It also helps your QAs out. So I always have the QAs during the different Scrum meetings review that acceptance criteria. So definitely, if you guys have definition of ready, these are some of the basic things that you can have in the user story definition of ready exercise, and have your teams go through that. Okay. And share some examples. There's a ton of stuff online. Most of you are Agile coaches already. You got a lot of the great information. It's a great practice to do. Any questions? Any other thoughts on what are some of your best practices for definition of ready that you guys want to share?
I would just say, I think you hit everything on the bullet point. I would just maybe add, like, not necessarily free from external dependencies, because you can have a dependency between team A and team B that needs to be coordinated during the same sprint in order for them to link it together at the end and push it to prod. So maybe I would just say a little bit different about the external dependency. Just make sure dependencies are coordinated in the same sprint if need be. Because if you say free from external dependency, it kind of makes new people think you can't do a dependency together on two teams in one sprint.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that that's what that means. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you so much. But to your point, you just reminded me of another one. Again, to some of the teams that I've worked with that have had a problem with stakeholders coming in and completing user acceptance testing, we have added to the definition of ready, UAT stakeholder confirmed, available, or scheduled for UAT during the sprint. We have added that to some of our definition of ready in those teams that you have multiple stakeholders all over the place for testing.
So when you're saying external, you're meaning more the business.
The business, yes, the business.
Okay, all right, that was my bad. Okay, I'm sorry.
No worries. But very good. Okay, very, very good. All right, let's zoom out a little bit. And to the right-hand side is just a picture. A lot of you are Jira admins, so this is not new to you, of the workflow, that we use for the statuses of the tickets. So mostly to do in progress and done, and then anything else in between is the many different types of statuses that you could have. And this is an example from the previous board that we showed. Okay, this is just basic setup.
Can I ask a question, Regina? This is Raquel.
Yes.
There are instances, I'm not sure if you're going to touch on it, where when you have these columns in Jira, sometimes you can't pick it up when you are trying to, say, create a dashboard because of how it's configured. Will you be touching a little bit on that?
I am going to be showing examples of dashboards. Save that question for when we look at the dashboards.
Okay.
Because that might be something that some of the Jira admins on the call may be able to help you with.
Yeah, because sometimes I see, like, if you add these, you have the standard in progress, QA, done, for instance. But when you start adding too many ready for QA or ready for development, somehow it skips or it doesn't add to the count of the duration, that kind of thing, or the story points that you established.
Okay, put the question in the chat, Raquel.
Okay.
And then we'll definitely go to it. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to do an exercise now. We have a little exercise. I'm gonna put the Miro board on the chat, and I would love for you guys to be interactive here and participate in it. If any of you have an issue loading Miro, then we can add some of the answers on the chat if that's easier. But if Ali can help me put the link to the Miro board on the chat, like a minute for you guys to upload, please upload it in Chrome because it works a little bit easier. Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so
I'm there.
Okay. All right, guys, let's give everybody a couple of minutes. I see how many users we got on there. 3. It's a competition. Let's see who gets here first. It does take a little while to load because Miro's pretty heavy. And then Kim is driving. No worries, Kim. I'm gonna walk through the exercise so you can hear it, Kim, okay? And here's the question. No worries. The question is, identify how the Agile teams will be utilizing the Jira Scrum boards, right? And any of Jira functionalities in each of the Scrum meetings, okay? How would the Agile team use the Jira boards in a sprint planning meeting? How will the Agile teams use Jira in a stand-up? How will the Agile teams use Jira in backlog refinement? Or how will the Agile teams utilize Jira in sprint review or the sprint retrospective? And there may be stuff that I haven't shared, that I haven't shown, but how are you guys, how are your teams utilizing the Jira tool within your Scrum meetings? That's the question. That's the exercise. And then everybody, so Kim, for you to know, everybody's putting stickies because we want you to focus and drive carefully, please. All right, we got 9 people. If any of you are having issues getting into the Miro and you want to maybe on the chat, pick a meeting and put some notes, pick one of the Scrum meetings. As long as you put the name of the Scrum meeting and say, hey, how do your teams best utilize Jira during the facilitation of the Scrum meeting? All right, man, you guys are good. I see everybody super active in there. I got 11 people. You got 11 people on the board, Ali. Maybe you can help me read for sprint planning. What are some of the options that folks put on there? How are they utilizing the Jira tool during sprint planning?
Sure. If you want here, ranking and prioritizing during sprint planning, story pointing during sprint planning, refining descriptions and acceptance criteria, setting priority level, story refinement and story pointing is another one for that. We have one writing in progress there. Make sure everything that's included for the sprint actually matches the priorities. Yeah, that's a great one.
Okay, very good, very good. Remember when we were talking about definition of ready and definition of done, right? Which meeting do we review? May we review our definition of ready checklist?
I would say backlog refinement.
Uh-huh. Very good. And sprint planning, both. So I would put a sticky, help me. Hey, Ali, awesome, Ali, great answer. Put a sticky that says DOR in sprint planning and in part of backlog refinement. Okay, very, very good. And okay, so Ali, maybe you can help us read how the team uses the Agile tool in daily stand-ups. What do we have?
I see here progress updates, clear potential blockers, go over what people are doing, what they did, what their priorities are, etc. Look at the burn down chart and identifying blockers and relevant updates.
Okay, awesome. So do most of you have the practice of bringing up the Scrum board during the daily stand-up?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know what else we would use.
Yes, definitely.
To be honest.
Okay.
What he said.
What he said. I love it. Awesome, awesome. All right, who wants to volunteer to read product backlog refinement? Let's see, Raquel. Raquel, how are you doing? Can you see the stickies okay?
Yes, I can.
Let's see. Product backlog refinement. What do we have?
For backlog refinement, to focus on stories that don't currently meet DOR, sizing tasks, revision of items in backlog that meet DOR,
Right.
and the last one, with the group assembled, go over tickets, prioritization, and make sure they should all be there.
Okay, very, very good. Thank you, Raquel.
No worries.
Do you want to help out with sprint reviews since you're there already?
Okay. All right. For sprint reviews, what's done, sprint outcomes, improvements, and revise what items, were completed. Definition of done.
Okay.
I want to add something here too. It's a little bit of how the team felt during that particular sprint, especially if you had changes or a couple of roadblocks. That's a good time to get the team's reflection on how they felt running through that sprint.
Okay, during the sprint review.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. I wanted to add something else there in sprint review. And when we were looking at the Scrum board, how many of you have the practice of writing sprint goals in Jira? Is everybody familiar with what we call sprint goals? Okay, so that's a great practice. And there is a place when you start the sprint, Jira allows you that where you put the start and end date of the sprint, it's like a box, you can actually type in the sprint goal. The sprint goal, we normally ask the product owners to come in with a draft sprint goal into sprint planning. It's written in basic business language, very simple. It's just a couple of sentences. They're usually representative of the scope of the user stories that the team is going to complete that sprint. And so the reason why I'm saying that is because when throughout the sprint in the daily stand-up is like, hey, how are we doing in meeting the sprint goal? That's a question sometimes we may ask in the daily stand-up, right? But in sprint review is all about, did we meet the sprint goal or not? So add a sticky there, Ali, please, called sprint goal. And it's all about, did we get the user stories completed? Did we get the user stories done, right? But it's about meeting the sprint goals as well. In Jira, that's a good practice to have. I always say, again, in sprint planning, have the product owner come in with a draft sprint goal. And then at the end of sprint planning, I always say the Agile teams make everything better. You know, you'll have your final sprint goal as soon as you hit the start sprint button and at the end of sprint planning session. Okay, very good. All right, let me read thank you, Raquel. Appreciate your help. I'm going to read the sprint retrospective to find stories that are incomplete or ran into impediments. Very good. Celebrate wins. Yes, because in Agile, we celebrate all the time. Okay, all the time. We don't have to wait till the end of 3 months, 6 months like we used to. Now we celebrate every sprint. Review what's not done and create improvements for the next sprint and visualize at the board. Okay, and it looks like somebody's adding one more sticky. Let's see. Review. I think Javier is writing something. Okay, review what was accomplished in the sprint goal. Very, very good. Okay, so I just want to make sure again, a lot of you are experienced Agile coaches, you're experienced Scrum Masters, experienced project managers, but there may be some of you that are new to Scrum Mastering that to understand how important the tool is and how we utilize the tool in facilitating the Scrum meetings, right? It's a tool, it's an aid, it's a guide, but it's having that transparency and visibility to be able to at any point in time see where our teams are with the work that they're doing. Okay, but in order to do that, you know, the data is only as good as what we put into it, right? So if you have bad data, you know, you're gonna have bad reports, right? If you're not updating things correctly. So the tool is only as good as the data, as the quality of the data that we put into it, right? And the usage of it, right? But understand that as Scrum Masters, from the Scrum perspective, you are the master facilitators and helping your teams understand the best techniques in the Agile practices like definition of ready, definition of done, acceptance criteria, good user story writing, good epic writing, right? You know, how to estimate stories correctly that are happening in all these meetings that you're facilitating or that your team might actually be helping facilitating as well is a good practice. And that helps you have better information in the tools to provide better transparency and visibility. Okay. Any questions? Did you guys like that exercise? Okay, very simple. This is just a for many of you, so I appreciate it. Okay, let's back out real quick, and thank you guys. You guys did an amazing job using Miro. You're now Miro experts. I'm gonna go through the next section pretty quickly because this is just a review for many of you. So these are a lot of the reports, right, that we have for Agile teams. And this is more of finding out, hey, again, we're going back to you being Scrum Masters, we're project managers, and you're facilitating the Scrum meetings. How often and what use are we getting out of these reports to facilitate a conversation with our Agile teams? Okay. Again, data is just data. We also, as Agile coaches, recommend that we don't abuse the data, that we do not. Okay. It's more to facilitate a conversation to helping our teams get to high performance. All right. That's really what the goal is. These reports are to facilitate conversations to help our teams remove blockers, remove impediments, and get better and have better retrospectives. So some of the reports that I brought in, if you scroll down to the bottom, the velocity chart. Let me ask you guys, which Scrum meetings would you bring up a velocity chart? Let's ask that.
Retrospective.
The retrospective, very good. Which other one? I think the other one that you were talking about.
You could do it at the daily stand-up to see how you're doing.
But this one's at the end of the sprint. This is the velocity.
Okay.
This one is
Then the sprint review, you could show the stakeholders that you have what you have been able to complete, what you were committed to, and what you were able to complete.
Yeah, we're usually on this.
Yeah, so that the leadership and management teams also can see how the team is getting to the point of high performing, a new team and see how they're progressing as they mature.
Agreed, but I'm gonna say something. Make sure you have the discussion with your teams before displaying this to leadership.
Yep.
And retrospect with the teams on, hey guys, look at the velocity this sprint versus the last sprint. There's a trend here. Right? And so the velocity chart, we track the amount of work completed from sprint to sprint. This helps you determine your team's velocity and estimate the work that your teams can realistically achieve in future sprints. So when you look at this, it could tell you a story. It's about the story. Like maybe there was a sprint where a bunch of people took vacation after sprint planning happened. So your capacity was impacted. Maybe there was a sprint where scope was added in after the sprint started. Okay. Maybe there was a sprint where you had a lot of blockers or dependencies, right? Or then maybe the team is not estimating at a maturity level where they should estimate. Or maybe they're being overzealous and they're taking too many stories into the sprint. This report alone, like if a coach takes a look at this report and sees the history, I would come in with a ton of questions to the team. Because this tells you a story. This tells you a story. Go ahead, Kim.
Also, like, amen on the things that we achieved, because I feel like in IT, it's all focused on like what we did wrong, right? But to your point, a lot of the user stories aren't broken down sufficiently. So one story may, whatever they're estimating at is too small. But the other thing is teaching the teams that they need to be able to break these stories into smaller stories and then layer them throughout the sprint so they can actually complete them.
Exactly. So if you start seeing a lot of stories roll over, that's exactly to the point that you're making, right, Kim? The stories were too big, they were not estimated correctly, right? Or they brought too many stories in. Or maybe it's a brand new project that they don't know that much about. So now you see a discrepancy in the velocity because they got to do more research, they got to do more spikes. They're learning a new solution. Okay, I'm going to speed up a little bit because I'm also looking at the time, but these reports are great. If you go to the one below, I'm not going to get too much into it. The burn down charts is another one that is pretty good. That also tells a story, and you can track this during what you guys said, hey, during the daily stand-ups, hey, how are we tracking to our sprint goal? If you scroll to the one below, let me see. And then I just brought in an example, the one that says the sprint report underneath it. This is a nice one because if you could see, if you hone in to the report in the bottom, you can see like the stories. Let's see, scroll down a little bit below, like the stories that have been completed and then the ones that have not been completed. Again, did we have scope change? Did we not decompose the stories correctly? The point being is that Jira is a great tool. We're back to Jira, right? It has a ton of different types of reports. We should be leveraging these reports, again, not to point fingers at the team, but to teach the team on how to look at the data so they can have a better conversation and look at their work from different views. Now we can have a better retrospective with the teams, right? Great to have. The Agile Manifesto is our foundation, our 4 values, and the 12 principles. I'm going to jump to this at the end if we have a couple of minutes, okay? Because I want to have a great discussion about this because it's all about the Agile mindset. We are nothing without the Agile values and the 12 principles. And this is something that we want to retrospect all the time. And then imagine saying, okay, how are we utilizing the tools, right, to improve in our agility and our mindset? And looking at these Agile principles from that perspective, just food for thought. I'm not going to do the exercise now because I want to have a little bit of time to look at the rest of the items. But if we have a couple of minutes at the end, we'll come back to that. Okay, so scaling Jira. I was calling this scaling Jira. How many of you have used or are using the plan view functionality in Jira? I see Steven. And who else? Anybody else? Raquel, Julie. Okay.
Just started using it.
Awesome. So we all come from project management backgrounds, and leaders are used to seeing reports that look like roadmaps. Okay. And we're going to be asked to do that. The cool thing is that Jira has a functionality called Plan View that builds many exciting roadmaps. We actually use it to pull data from multiple Agile teams. So I just wanted to show you something real quick. In the top left, if you're inside Jira and you're in the toolbar, it's called plans. If you have that turned on, you'll see it as plans. And then this is something that we typically customize and we create, okay? You can configure that and you can pull data from multiple Agile team boards to create a roadmap view. And this is what we call plan view, okay? Okay, now I want to show the table below that where it says possible Jira PMO. So I have configured plan view for many of my PMO offices, right? Because they need roadmap views of all the Agile team boards in Jira, okay? And when you create a plan view, you're creating a roadmap. There's different levels of information. So using PMO language, because a lot of this is done from the PMO perspective, we can create a portfolio level, a program level, and then an initiative level called a project. And then from there, hook in all the epics across multiple Agile teams and all the user stories within those epics, and even subtasks, and even risks and actions, okay? Let's say you guys have a hierarchy and you're doing portfolio management and you're doing program management, or you have a group of Agile release trains that are multiple Agile teams that are working together under a name, okay? Like an art. But these things are defined in your organization. Before doing the setup, you have to have your portfolios defined in your organization. You have to have your programs defined in your organization, and you have your projects defined in your organization. We have all of our projects in Jira. For those organizations that are still project-based and the teams are delivering projects, we actually create a project ticket called an initiative in Jira. But we're creating tickets above that called a program and creating a tickets above that called a portfolio. This setup of the top portion there is done so that we can pull a roadmap in plan view and then pull all the different Agile teams. So if you zoom out again, Ali, and let's look at the roadmap on the top. This is just a quick example. Okay, we're going to zoom in, 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 zoom in. So the top ticket, this is just an example. The top ticket is the portfolio. It's actually, in this case, it's the program. That program is a child ticket of a project, which is an initiative. And then that initiative has epics associated with it. And inside every single epic, you have the user stories. So the roadmap setup, this is where you have to have consistency in the field standardization of all your epics and all your user stories. If you can't do this, if each team is not utilizing the same fields at your epic and the user story level, you will not be able to pull standardized information across multiple teams. Let me make that very clear, okay? Why? Because you may be using a field called due date. You may be using a field called start date. Some teams are utilizing the sprint field. And then you've got your Agile teams. We have a field called Agile team. And we actually have an Agile team name. So this roadmap, again, it's a roadmap. It's talking about due dates. It could even have a release date. It could be anything that shows the timeline of delivery. So you guys have to do an analysis, identifying the different fields that you understand standardize across all your Agile teams, pretty much at the epic and the user story level. I would stay there for the standardization, and then you pull the data in, and then you'll see, oh my goodness, and also the status. You don't see the status here column, but I would also have the status column. in progress, to do in QA, etc. That's another one that you can add. This is 100% customizable. And so this is a view for leadership. So Raquel, this is a nice leadership view, but you got to have the standardization of the things. Let me see what you guys are putting on the chat. Let me see. Jira control report is used for Kanban teams better than raw cycle time. Okay, so I know you guys are having a Kanban conversation. That's good, Howard. Any other thoughts on plan view? Anything else cool that you guys have been doing with plan view?
Yeah, Regina, just to follow up what you just said a while ago, I don't think I have my projects within my portfolio, the team that I'm on. I don't think they have it from the portfolio level. However, is it okay to just have it from the Epic level?
You can. That's fine. It's just this is customized for the PMO, and they do have their projects in Jira. They have a project board. So when they go through the business case intake approval, they actually have a Kanban board for their projects. And it's a project ticket. It's an initiative ticket. And they have financial information, and they have the status of the business case. And then once that business case project has been approved, then they tie all the epics to it. But that's that practice. But
Okay.
But if you have it at the epic level, that's beautiful too. As long as you could see, a roadmap view, right?
Yeah, it's probably because there are several tools being used. So
Okay.
Yeah, it's great elsewhere. All right, thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else want to say anything else about plan view and the usage of it that you guys are doing?
Yeah, I think a cool feature with plan view, I see it in the corner there, that thing called auto schedule. I think it's pretty interesting. A lot of the times we don't use that. It's just easier to, at a large scale, to move things around manually. But if you have your dependencies set up properly and you have your backlog ranked properly, that auto schedule will actually schedule your stories and enablers over your sprints or the time frame, whatever you're using, automatically, and kind of string it out to your release date that you have set. So I think that's a pretty cool feature. I thought that was interesting to use.
Nice. Thank you. That's a good one. I had not done that one before, so now I'm gonna go do research on that. I love it.
Don't put too much faith into it. I think it's still a little bit easier to sit down with your team and actually walk through placing things in certain sprints and the right time frames. But if you're pressed for time and you just want to try it out, it could be a nice feature to use.
Nice. Okay, awesome. All right, guys. So I'm gonna zoom out of plan view. Food for thought. If you're not using it, please do research on it. And then what I have in the right, and again, I'm just going to go through this very, very quickly, are some examples or some of the dashboards that we've used before. So we have like an epic dashboard there showing the statuses of all the different epics in progress. We have dashboards for like our releases. If you scroll down, we have dashboards for bugs, for defects. If you go down a little bit more, Ali, there you see you can do a table for defects. And if you go over to the left, you have, again, other different views of where you're at with your epics. This is a little bit more of a program type of board because as you can see, it has multiple Agile teams in it, okay? And this organization does do quarterly planning. So the epics are associated with a planned PI. You see that field there called planned PI? That's a customized field where we're actually showing the quarter of when that epic is planned to be completed. So when we do these, we're focusing on a particular quarter, okay? And then if you go down, you have other user stories type of reports, and we do have action and risk tickets that are in the Scrum board. So that way, when the teams are in the middle of the sprint, they can create a risk ticket or an action ticket, and then we pull it into the Scrum, into these program type of boards. We're utilizing that a lot, and we utilize it a lot for quarterly planning. Okay, if you zoom out, I think to the right, we have just another quick view of another dashboard. This one we actually put like the program level meetings in there. And then there's the risk and action board. Again, this is more like scaling, like when you're pulling information from multiple teams. So like a release train engineer might be using this board because they have an Agile release train, right? Which is pretty cool. So you got all your risk and action tickets there. You can add any fields to it, but we've got like our program schedule, our leadership meetings, more like the program level kind of Agile release train type of meetings on the top. And then in the bottom, we have a nice view of the epics with their associated user stories and the statuses and where they're at in what sprints. Okay.
Regina, have you guys, because this is my first class with you guys, so I may have missed it. Have you guys done any meetups on reports and dashboards at all for Jira?
This is my first one, and it's just a small portion of it, but we can do a lot more. And we're always looking for speakers, by the way.
Well, the reason I'm saying, I feel like even with me, when I start, like, I feel like the word reporting is said so many times, but then A, nobody knows how to build the report. And then B, like you mentioned, with the hierarchy of the parent-child relationships, a lot of organizations don't have that ability to roll up. So I think that would be an awesome subject to add to like future ones for all of us too.
I love it. I love it. Maybe I can pair up. If anybody wants to volunteer to pair up with me, I would love that.
Yeah,
let me know. Let me know. Kim, reach out to me, please. That'd be awesome.
is your information in the chat?
I'm gonna I may ask Ali to put
Okay.
my link in, but I'll put my name right there, Regina Batista.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Regina.
You're welcome. So guys, I hope you found this useful. I know that I love the participation because this is a community we share and sharing is caring. So I really thank you guys.